Welcome, everybody, to the show. This is Counter Clipping show number 148. Our topic tonight is CRTs and, I suppose, other non-CRT ways to handle combat resolution in war games. And hopefully this will be interesting. I have received feedback that it is. We are clipping Axis Empire's Ultimate Edition. I am over halfway through it, actually, so that's not too bad. We will get a unboxing video of this is scheduled for next week. Let me pull this thing off, which for some reason we keep it up during the show with Dan, and it stays up for this show even though it's different settings. Anyway, that is StreamYard's fault. So I would like to welcome everybody here tonight, and thanks for coming. We are drinking the Glenmorangie La Santa. This is pretty good. It's also holding this box up, so we won't move it. I believe it's bottled at 46%. And I like even the regular Glenmorangie 10-year for the record. And it is a very economic friendly scotch, in my opinion. It's not the easiest scotch to drink if you're not a scotch person, I don't think, but I like it. And it is fairly economical. So, and it is not noticeably smoky if you don't like that. Some people like scotch, but they don't like the smokiness. In which case, Glenmorangie would be something I might point somebody towards, or Glenlivet, really. So, but it is pretty good. I think we will put just a tiny amount of water in it. Normally, I don't do this, but there we go. Just a drop or two. So, before we get started, let's say hello to Andrew Atkin, Bob Kowalczyk, Brent McCabe, Chet Bell, Da Wendnard, Dale Brady, Daniel Silverthorne, David Imperato, Ed Holtzman, Egret, Eric Schaefer, Greg Linklater, Gronyard Rich, HUN644 New, Jeff Anderson, Jeff Beeler, Jeffrey Edwards, Joe Faust, Joel, John Mogg, Kyle Creeder from the Wargame Boot Camp, Kyle Harris, Lee Grant, Frank Davis is here tonight. Mark McNair, Mr. Mark Herman is here tonight. Mark, thanks for coming out. Matt Davidson, Meandering Mike, Michael Kirk, Michael Simon, Neil Badke, Patrick of Patrick's Tactics and Tutorials, Robert Maxey, Ryan Huard, which sounds like a place that Sinestro may have come from. Stacking Limit, Tim Greenhaw, Rick Cox, William Bird, Winterson, and Wolf Dog. Everybody, welcome. If I missed anybody, and I know that I have, let me apologize. So I know lots of folks are having fun at, well, I suppose the fun has ceased at this point. At this past weekend's SD HistCon, looked like a dynamite event. Lots of friends were there. I did not get to make it out there this year or in any previous year. We'll see what happens for next year. It would be cool. But it just wasn't gonna. So it's like partially because I was already committed at that point, at the point where I had to make the decision. There's a cat. Oh, for Pete's sake. Come here. So here's the cat. This is Satine. She's not supposed to be in here. Let's remove her. I'll be right back. She has discovered that she can, in fact, jump over the kitty gate. The legend himself, Fucko, has arrived, so we can all rest easy that we will not be having a Fucko-free evening. So, anyway, what the hell was I saying? I don't even remember what I was saying. Yeah, the cat. So yeah, the cat has decided that she doesn't care about the kids' gate that's up there to keep the cats out. So we're gonna. She has guest appeared in unboxing videos before as well, by the way. So the cat's doing great, but the cat obviously rolled to intercept. I don't know that I have any news other than SD HistCon. The Like I said, there's a lot of pictures in circulation from the event. It looks like it was a great event. There was a lot of new stuff that some of which is in the publication chain somewhere along the lines, and some of which is not yet, but some really interesting looking things. Um, so couldn't. It's like right on top of Compass Expo, which I was already committed to. It's a relatively expensive event for someone coming out from Ohio, and I just couldn't swing those events. So the other thing is that there's a Compass Expo. If I really want to go to Compass Expo, there's one in May now, so I could actually, in principle, go there. But May is not a great time either. It's right on top of Origins. It's kind of sandwiched between Origins and Buckeye Game Fest, neither of which I can really skip. So maybe next year we just make the command decision to go to SD HistCon. We will see what happens. So I don't know if they're going to continue the whole virtual SD HistCon thing or not. I felt like it was quite successful when they did it, but I don't think they've done one in a little while, right? I don't know. Maybe I'm nuts about that, actually. So anyway, so this thing right here is basically 2 games and 2 large expansions, all in one box. And I've got the 2 games, Axis Empires, Totaler Krieg, and Dicenso, punch, clip, organized, ready to go. I probably will do some organizational refinement. And I'm working on Dice of Decision, which is sort of the pre-game mini game that's like way faster than something like a Days of Decision or Gathering Storm, but nevertheless allows you to start at the pretty much the beginning of World War One and develop an alternate history scenario for your game. It looks quite neat. So that's what I'm clipping now. There's also um, Schiffskrieg, which is the air naval expansion, which does look like it will substantially increase. I don't know about substantially, but it looks like it will increase playtime. But it also might make the Pacific War in particular more engaging. It's not a strong point of the previous version of the game that Pacific War played on its own. Carl, creator from the Wargame Bootcamp, who should know, says they did a virtual SD HistCon last year, and I think I actually popped into it, thinking about it, but I don't remember exactly when that was. Shit's been real busy lately. So that's a regular one. Chad Canady, welcome back to the show, and thanks very much. The support is much appreciated. The target idea there is Q3 of 2024. So we've got time on that. That is a September-esque time frame, give or take a month, and I think I can manage to make that work. Particularly since, for obvious reasons, it's going to be local over here. So, exact format, it's all going to kind of depend on what the space costs and what kind of space we can get and all that. And I do have a contact list of places to reach out to, and it's getting to be about that time actually. We are, as I think I may have mentioned, we are already talking about what we will be doing at Winterfest. It's actually a little early to be beginning that talk, but and that is in February. Working on the Japanese at the moment. That's in February. and I'm not sure what we'll be doing yet. I really want to play World in Flames or Fatal Alliances or something like that, and I'm bringing it to Compass Expo, and hopefully we can at least get some pieces pushed around. Marty Sample, thanks so much for your satanic contribution. Much appreciated. Oh, look at this. So, Winter's Victory update. Marty has signed off on the final proof of the rulebook, which will go to the local printer this week, hopefully shipping in 30 days or so. Myself and tons of other people are very much looking forward to Winter's Victory and the ensuing avalanche of ILAO games that we will be seeing over the next year or two. I'm not sure what's up with that. That I think is probably just coincidence. Herman Letman, thanks for stopping by. Hopefully, when we get to it, it will be interesting. And we're only 12 minutes in. So, by my reckoning, I have at least 3 minutes to waste yet. But yeah, I'm fairly impressed with what I see here so far with Axis Empires. Like I said, you're going to see a video unboxing of it next week, and it's going to be long. It's 35 plus minutes, so there'll be a lot of talk about the previous editions and what's new in this one and the components and all that jazz. But TLDR on that, it looks good to me, and I liked the previous version of the game. Frank, if you want to share space with the cat, if anybody there, so it is possible that there may be like a mini art fest in, say, early spring, which is going to be here at the house. And if we do that, obviously, it's not going to be just anybody can walk in, but it's, I'll have crash space. Let's put it that way. So, and yes, there will be cats. So there's that. Mike Berticelli, thanks for stopping by. Looks like he played Plum Island Horror at GMT West. I almost said SD HistCon because that just happened. There's no, there's no like totally dead spot in the convention calendar for me, really. Not so much in terms of things that I'm going to definitely go to, but things that I at least need to pay attention to when they're happening. And I do. Oh hell, continental breakfast is like a coffee and a muffin or something like that. I mean, that is not breakfast in my opinion. Breakfast in my opinion includes breakfast meats, toast, hash browns, eggs, and that kind of stuff. So if we do anything at the house, there will be that is an overnight thing. There will be breakfast in the morning, and I've got a Blackstone, so I can do breakfast in significant quantities. And anybody who hasn't seen them, by the way, and this is totally off topic, but those dehydrated hash browns in the little cartons that Costco has are really quite good. They are indistinguishable, in my opinion, from like fresh hash browns that you might grate out of your own potatoes and substantially less trouble. So, the full English breakfast looks impressive. However, I don't like baked beans. I understand that British baked beans are less candy-like than American baked beans, and they might be better. But really, that's the only thing that I actually object to on that plate. I'm all about the black pudding. So there is I can do pancakes. I actually do pretty decent pancakes, actually. As Jeff Beeler mentions, so the supply rules here are basically the supply rules from World of Flames Final Edition. They're not noticeably different. Well, they might be noticeably different, but they're not much different. And it's a little bit tricky, but not super duper tricky. So I'm not a huge fan of Waffle House either. I'll eat it in an emergency, but not a huge fan of the problem is their waffles suck and they're not that cheap anymore. So anyway, so CRTs. Let's get some scotch here and start talking about CRTs. And they're Zeppelins. That is true. There are both Zeppelins and Canadians and Chinese, right? The Chinese can do something. I'm not sure what they will do, but they could do something. So, no, it's like a pack of 8 cartons, and each carton is about 2 to 4 people's worth of hash browns. So, Clark Commando 1983, Mark, welcome back to the show. Hopefully, you're starting to feel better. Let's we're all rooting for you over here. And out there across the wargaming internet, I think that's safe to say. There is also a full Irish breakfast, by the way, which actually sounds like something I might like a little bit more. than the full English breakfast. So, all right. So CRTs, right? So I guess I need to acknowledge right off the top that not every game even has a CRT to resolve combat on. The ones that I can think of as examples are those games that we might call bucket o' dice games. Um, and I wouldn't include, say, Triumph of Tragedy on this because the different types of units have different target numbers on the dice. Even though you are rolling a pool of dice, aircraft hit on a different number than tanks, for example. So you got to kind of look that up. So that's not really a CRT, but it's a table that you need to resolve the actual combat roll. But the example I can think of is the Columbia Games system. And the specific example I'm thinking of is the one from the East Front, West Front, Med Front, Euro Front. I think it's just East Front, West Front, and Euro Front now in the current edition. And that's a pretty interesting game in a number of ways. But possibly the least interesting thing about it is the combat resolution system, where you have a number of pips on the block, depending on what side of the block is facing up. And that is the number of dice you roll, and you are rolling against a target number. This is a system that has popped up in a number of different places. The Avalanche Press adaptation of Third Reich may actually use something similar as well. But I'm not sure. I've never owned that, and it's been a long time since I've even looked at it. I know that it is considered a bucket o' dice system. Yeah, Steve Dole just beat me to the unboxing video, and I will remark, not enviously at all, that Steve's unboxing video is doing very well. But it's a pretty impressive package for a really quite high price. So it doesn't surprise me if there'll be like more traffic on unboxing videos as people kind of figure out whether they want to spend the $268 that it costs right now for it. I ran the numbers using my usual methodology, which is to say, okay, if I play this once, how many dollars per hour of entertainment value am I getting? And that number works out to be something like $5 an hour of it for entertainment. And I think that is not a bad number. And I expect to play this more than once. So I have no issues. Well, I did. I mean, it is expensive. I'm not going to tell you it's not expensive, but it is. I'll get my money's worth out of it. Let me put it that way. So let's see here. Oh, very good. So Mark Hodgkinson says that he is one of the folks playing Fatal Alliances on the Discord server for World in Flames. That's pretty cool. At some point, and this is really just a matter of freeing the time up, I do have to get some Vassal stuff going. Some of the stuff I really want to play doesn't have Vassal modules. The old ETO and PTO, for example, the TSR ones. I really kind of want to play those, and those, as far as I know, don't have Vassal modules. I guess there is a bit of news, which is that Limey Yank Games, which is other than Vassal's own site, is kind of the number one place on the internet to go find Vassal modules, is having some hosting issues where they're under some restrictions. So go check out Limey Yank Games news update. They're not going down, but they're in search of new hosting, and they're not going to allow new uploads or limited uploads or something like that until they get their hosting situation sorted out. Very good. Very good. So Mike Berticelli mentions Fighting Formations, unique dice system for combat resolution with different size dice and adding them with the combat and defense factors. So I don't think I've ever seen that at least as I have not looked at Fighting Formations. Yes, I probably should. I have seen in RPGs sort of a ranking system for, say, character abilities that scales with different die types. So Earth Dawn is the one I could think of off the top of my head, where you have like, and the Cortex system does something similar actually. You have like a skill or an ability or strength or whatever it is, and that ability has a dice rating where it might be a D6, but if it's a little bit better than D6, it might be a D8. and then you add a skill die and a stat die together and get a total, and you're rolling that against the target number. If fighting formations works like that, that would definitely be the first time I have seen something like that applied in a war game, off at least off the top of my head. I just bumped the monitor, which is where the camera is mounted. So that is there's a pile of good reasons for me to check out fighting formations, and it's just one of those things I haven't gotten around to yet. So the only ones I can so the I think Second World War at Sea has a bucket of dice type of deal going on too. Avalanche Press seems to like that approach. Now there is an advantage to that approach, and that advantage is you don't need a table, right? Especially if the target number is just a 4 or better, whatever, or 6 or whatever it is. Then you don't need a table for it. You can just say, okay, I'm rolling this many d6s based on the number on the pieces, and I'm gunning for 6s or gunning for 4s or better or whatever that number is. So let's see here. Would CRTs be like the combat resolution we have in the game War Room? I haven't looked at War Room. However, thinking about it, didn't Axis and Allies do something similar as well, where you have different units have like a different target number that you're rolling on d6s or whatever the dice are? It's been decades since I played Axis and Allies. Oh boy. So Stacking Limit mentions the Second World War at Sea is bucket of dice type of thing. That's what that mechanic is called. That's used sometimes disparagingly, but I don't see any reason. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with it. The one thing that I will say that is I think minor, but still real issue that I have with the bucket of dice idea is that it's kind of difficult to just calculate to like eyeball odds or chance of success on a pile of dice type of system. Can I figure it out? Yeah, usually, but it's like more mental effort than say, oh, I got to get a 7 or higher. It's a D10, so I got a 70% chance to get a or 30%, 40% chance to get a 7 or higher. So it takes a little more mental gymnastics to figure out what the odds are. Greg Grant mentions the 1d6 CRT. So this is the standard, right? The D6, I'm well aware that there are, at this point, a decent number of war games that use D10s. Not many that use anything other than D6s and D10s, but there are some. But the D6 remains the expectation. If you don't go out of your way to pick something different, chances are pretty good it's just a D6. Now, there are D6. So when we start talking about CRTs, okay, the Simonich CRT, it's been, I mean, I've got a million CRTs in my head, so it's I'm doing this from memory. Somebody correct me if I say this incorrectly. So I want to say there's no real DRMs on that table. I want to say that all the combat modifiers are column shifts. And even if that's not the case, there are definitely game systems that do that don't have DRMs. So the actual result range is 1 to 6. Okay. Russian campaign is like that. I've been pretty sure there's no DRMs at all in Russian campaign. It's just column shifts. On the other hand, you've got say like an OCS style CRT where there's column shifts, but there are also DRMs. And you may get you're rolling 2d6, but you can easily get a -2 on that roll based on action rating. So you can not easily, but if it's me rolling, you can get zeros, trust me. So British Albion hates it when people memorize complicated CRTs, like in. So I kind of feel like usually they're not really memorizing a CRT; that they're just kind of getting a feel for it. That doesn't mean don't look it up, although that's an annoying thing. No, I'm going to look it up. Thank you very much. But you get a feel for it. So in something like OCS, for example. I got a pretty good feel as to whether a barrage roll is going to turn out to be just based on the number in the column. Based on that, I think I got a pretty decent idea of what the result's going to be. That doesn't mean I don't check because I don't trust my instincts necessarily, but you develop a feel for that by playing the game repeatedly. Um, One of the things that I really like about OCS is the unpredictability of combat. And that is to some extent just built into the results, but it's also built, especially apparent in the surprise roll, where you're rolling for surprise. It's an action rating differential roll. If the attackers roll in the dice, if they roll high enough, they get surprise, and if they get low enough, the defender gets surprise. And that's an additional D6 column shifts up or down. So that's the kind of thing that, looking at OCS years and years ago, I said, this I don't know, and it totally works. It totally works. Stacking Limit loves the IFT in ASL. Do you mean the IIFT or the regular IFT? So there's two. This is an interesting case study, if you will. Advanced Squad Leader has, and there may have been an equivalent in regular Squad Leader too, now that I'm thinking about it, although I don't know that I explicitly remember it. There's the infantry fire table, which is the rules standard, that has like breakpoints in the firepower, and this is the we'll talk about firepower versus odds in a bit here, but um, whereas the incremental table actually counts every factor. Okay, some people like the incremental infantry fire table. I don't. I like the regular one, just because I don't want to deal with the extra table, to be honest about it. Jonathan Dyer points out that Savage Worlds has a graduating dice attributed skill system as well. I have Savage Worlds. I may have played it once, but it's been ages. This mechanic is not that sort of scaling by dice type is not super duper common in RPGs, but it's not incredibly rare either. I know of several games that have used it. Let me put it that way. Did alt That doesn't sound right. I was about to say, did Alternity use that? Um, Paul R. I assume that's Paul Robra. Battles of the Old Northwest series doesn't use a CRT. It's totally possible to just not have a CRT, right? And it's still a CRT, just if it's not an odds-based CRT, right? So, Frank, the longer it takes to play a game, the better the game's entertainment value. Does daily savings time affect the formula? No, it's about hours of engagement versus what the thing costs, right? So directly there is an assumption built in there that the game is good. Okay, so if the game's not good, or at least if the game's not something that you'd like or I'd like, then it's kind of immaterial what the what the price is, right? It's probably not something you need. I am putting that in the wrong container. I'm just separating the dicey decision units out in terms of just dicey decision and dicey decision plus Shift-Krieg. Fighting formation CRT is really innovative, varies based on initiative. Again, this is a thing. I believe that's a Chad Jensen design. I think so. Very interesting looking game. Last 100 yards is supposed to be very interesting too. It's just like it's like World War II squad level tactical, and I'm like, enthusiasm low. Bob Kowalczyk says the air naval combat table in Empire of the Sun be a CRT. Yeah, I don't see why not. Right? We from very early days we've had non odds based CRTs, and in fact, one of the examples that I was going to pull up, and I didn't pull up enough visual aids on this, is the GCACW table, where it is sort of a manpower differential table, and then and if there is an odds imbalance one way or the other, then that is a DRM on that table. So, and in GB, so also, I guess now's not a terrible time to segue into this. There are also odds-based CRTs. There are firepower-based CRTs. However, we're defining firepower. Could be manpower too, right? something like the something like the Clash of Swords or Clash of Spears table or whatever it's called in GBOH would be like a manpower or firepower class of CRT. And then we might have like a static CRT where there really aren't columns. An example, but you might have DRMs, right? And an example of that would be the 2D10 CRT that's used as an option in World in Flames. Marty points out that same designer that designed Axis and Allies, Larry Harris, is the designer of War Room, and I am aware of that. But I haven't played Axis and Allies in decades, and I haven't really looked at War Room at all. I've certainly never handled a copy. Eric Hansen, chit pull damage. So kind of a parallel topic, though, that will typically be built into combat resolution, whether there is a CRT or not, is how combat losses are being modeled, right? A lot of table. So, for example, one of the most common, I'd say, complaints about the Library of Napoleonic Battle system that comes in the box is the sort of push-pull CRT, where it's really hard to do actual losses on that table. What you tend to do are retreats. And then if you cause an enemy to retreat into a zone of control, then there's a loss. It is otherwise fairly difficult, not impossible, but fairly difficult to score losses on that. And then this comes into the unit modeling system, right? I mean, that whole thing grows up out of Napoleon's Last Battles, which does have steps for some units, but mostly is not a game with steps. You just eliminate units. Mark says, issue with bucket of dice is at some point there has to be a floor result. Empire of the Sun is bucket of dice without the bucket. I've never thought of Empire of the Sun in that way because you're only rolling one die at a time. Maybe if you get an opposed roll, maybe it's two. But so I mean, reductively though, remember that um mathematically they can be equivalent. You can you can construct the same statistical model using a a, a single die with a linear range of results, multiple dice or set number of multiple dice with a bell curve, or a dice pool system with a variable number of dice. You just have to bear in mind what the odds are of results that you're getting, that you being the designer in this case. I mean, remember Big Turp, thanks for stopping by. Worst bucket of dice RPGs, Champions or Shadowrun? I've got a soft spot for both of those, to be honest about it. But certainly it could get out of hand. But that could happen in D&D too, with certain spell results that were bucket of dice spells like Fireball or Lightning Bolt. I think Lightning Bolt was like that too. It's been a long time. John Madison has gotten his first commercial hitting the channel. Sorry about that. Gotta bring home the bacon after all. All right. One of the things Mike Berticelli points out that one of the things happening in fighting formation is dropping a dice size with the range of the attack. You start with a D10 at normal range, drop to D8 for double range, D6 for triple range. That's an interesting concept in that, I mean, ultimately that's a DRM, right? I mean, you're subtracting an average from the roll of about a pip and a half. I think that sounds approximately right. No, you're dropping a whole average one, right? But you're limiting the range too. You're putting a ceiling on the range of whatever the die is. If it's D8, you can't roll more than an 8. So in a way, you're just kind of pushing the DRMs to the dice sizes. Again, there's nothing. That's a completely neutral statement in and of itself. At some point, though, and I think a couple of people have kind of danced around this, the bucket of dice. Ooh, yeah, good catch. This is absolutely true. So is Here I Stand. So is Virgin Queen, and I assume Tanto Manta probably will as well. Even Here I Stand is a little bit more restrained in terms of the number of dice you end up rolling. In Napoleonic Wars, you could end up rolling large numbers of dice. And I love that game. That's a terrific game, but it is a fistful of dice system. All right. Stigler points out that the range table in GBCW isn't a CRT. We are talking about, I would say the shock table is a CRT, but the range table is just a guideline to apply modifications to the result of the CRT. So it's just really a list that goes alongside. Jeff Beeler mentions, and of course this is right, that the Avalon Hill Classics all use the same CRT for many different combat situations, from Waterloo to Gettysburg to the Bulge to Africa. This I on the one hand, this is a question on which I'm inclined to be fairly charitable to those Avalon Hill Classics. For one thing, the we're talking about the 60s and maybe the very, very, very early 70s. So we ought to cut, Charlie Roberts and Tom Shaw and the like some degree of slack for forging the path ahead in the darkness. Okay. At a superficial level, there probably isn't anything really wrong with this. However, that said, the scale of your game is going to have something to say about what your combat resolution model is. So when we see strategic or operational games, for example, we are unlikely to see a firepower based CRT in those games. I won't say it doesn't happen, but it does. This Patty Rafesky, welcome back to the show. This is why I like dice towers or dice boxes or the dice whiskey glass, which the only bad thing I have to say about that is just the amount of noise that it makes. I got used to rolling D10s back when in the Rollmaster days. That's interesting. Some of these counters are Germans on the front, Japanese in the back. So that was a percentile system. And it's interesting that so few war games have worked off of a percentile system. Not none, but not many. The Gauss CRT is a percentile CRT. Kyle Harris never thought he cared about this subject until he realized it was actually a subject. Wait until we get into the terrain effects chart episode. I may or may not actually do that. It depends on if I have anything interesting to say about it after I've given it a little bit of thought. Stigler says bucket of dice is his least favorite. Anybody else think that's funny? There's one thing Stigler has an abundance of, it's least favorites. But I'm also not crazy about the bucket of dice mechanic in a war game, at least, because I think it's statistically sort of unpredictable. And from like a design standpoint, I mean, you want to have an idea of what the percentage chances of success or failure or a given result or whatever are. So I would probably never want to design a game with an actual bucket of dice system. Oh, this is a fair point. Game systems like Upfront and Combat Commander don't have CRTs, and they just use the card decks instead. And this is now I'm straining to remember exactly how that worked in Combat Commander, which I now haven't played in several years. But you do use the cards. You don't even roll dice. You and there's nothing that says you got to have dice, right? There are there's not many, but there are completely deterministic war games that don't roll dice and have no luck element whatsoever. That's unusual, but it is not totally unheard of. Those are so if excessive rolling is the problem, then the D20s numbered 1 to 10 twice are not going to help. So I've got I admittedly have like 2 dice towers out at different friends' houses, but I've got 5 dice towers. So at least 3 of which I've made myself. They're not hard to make. There is in fact a dice tower 3D printable model up on the Ardwulf's Lair file repository for patrons of the swordsman level and up. And if anybody prints that, I'd like to hear what they think of it. I think the trouble with just a filament based dice tower is that if you, I don't think it's heavy. I don't, I don't think it's heavy enough unless you weight it down. The CRT chart. So you're talking about the Clash of Spears table. Then I like that table too. I think that's really neat, actually. I mean, this is fundamentally true, right? It's not different than playing poker or blackjack and counting cards or what have you, right? It's the same type of thing. Ed Holtzman, I'm not sure if we're saying here that SFB doesn't have a CRT. I say it does. But each weapon has its own CRT and it is on the sheet. It has definitely shipped, so can verify. I think they're still selling it at a slightly at a discounted price. I think that's why it may still be showing as pre-order. So because I think the pre-order price was lower than it is now, but I think the final MSRP will be higher. Winterson says recommends to play War Room if we find a game at one of those conventions we go to. So lots of fun, even if it's very light. Oh, I mean, it doesn't necessarily look that light. It looks less light than Axis and Allies. Yeah, this is an entirely semantic point. That is, I'm aware that that's not the abbreviation that they use, but it's fun. It's functionally it is performing the same function as a CRT. All right. So this is something that OCS does, and in fact, so lots of games do this. Okay, there's certainly plenty that don't, but lots of games do this. Any game that has some other factor on it other than just strict combat power, right, is probably trying to model something to that effect. So, off the top of my head, I mean, I like this feature too, but off the top of my head, almost any Civil War game that I've played, that's not quite true, but lots of Civil War games, tactical Civil War games, will do this, where there will be some kind of morale or discipline or something like that number on the counter. That will vary by unit, right? And Antietam, you've got your Iron Brigade and your Irish Brigade that are going to have quite high numbers, and then you've got those green guys that file in later in the day. That I forget who was running that outfit. Ninth Corps, 12th Corps, something like that. That those guys are completely green, and their numbers are way lower in pretty much any game you want to name that covers that battle, at least in any detail at all. Can't wait till the GBACW folks have a new version of that available. I saw a playtest copy of playtest photo copy. I saw a photo of Wilson's Creek being playtested the other day. So, and I like the unpredictability too, as I've said, at least assuming I got that out, and maybe I didn't. I think OCS has tons of redeeming qualities. The question that's not the question. The question is, do you feel like the idiosyncrasies of OCS outweigh the virtues of OCS? Because OCS has plenty of virtues, but it is also a particular style of game. It does have many idiosyncrasies of its own and that are common to Dean's designs, and it has also gone through many years of refinement and polishing, and that's one of the reasons why there are very few questions arising out of that rule book. So yeah, this is totally true. The regular IFT does have a pattern. That's totally right, and they almost all will. That's actually a good point, though. One of the complaints that I have heard about the Battle for Normandy, the Dan Holt GMT game, which I think is quite a solid game, by the way, is the CRT and how the good results are and the bad results are kind of spread out. Generally, as I recall, you want to roll higher But just because you rolled high doesn't necessarily guarantee a good result. You'll find scattered throughout the high results a couple of shitty results as well. Some people really object to that. I don't really have a problem with that. I don't think it's the most elegant way to model unpredictability in combat resolution necessarily. You did show me this, and I have seen it elsewhere as well, shall we say? I have Winter Thunder, and I need to do something with it because I haven't had the time to do that yet. I have the digital version, by the way. You can buy a digital version of Winter Thunder on Steam. Um, this is a IFT versus IIFT is a point of pretty significant friction in the ASL community, actually. Um, some people love the IFT, some people hate it, and vice versa. So I personally, I'm not that emotionally invested in it, but personally, I'd rather just use the regular one. That's just me. So interestingly, you get a lot of these variant units in here in the Dice of Decision counter mix, which of course is expected, right? For Plan Z and all that stuff. But there's like a ton of units for Turkey. And because Dice of Decision commences with World War One, you have rather a lot of units for potentially surviving Austria-Hungary as well, which is kind of neat. Oh boy. I mean, this totally depends on who you talk to. There are ASL people that will absolutely swear by the IIFT and hate the regular IFT. Like I said, I don't. I don't think it's that serious a question, to be honest about it. All right, we're trying to get caught up on the chat here. Ooh, yeah. So Death in the Trenches actually looks pretty interesting in a number of respects. And damn it, I really haven't had a chance to look at it particularly closely yet. So, now see, I wouldn't. I mean, this is actually David's not restricting himself to the mechanics of us peasants. Let me put it that way. Alan Salazar, welcome back to the show. A shooter CRT. Clearly, Mark, I need to read that article again. Is that in the latest C3I or the previous one? Or the previous one? Previous one. Petty Fresky likes where CRTs penalize a bit when the attack is overwhelming odds in favor of the attacker. Penalize the attacker or penalize the defender? So there is, let's say you really need 3-to-1 odds on a, whatever the number is, it doesn't matter. 3-to-1 odds to get the result you want, but you end up throwing 5-to-1 or 6-to-1 in it again. So you over committed to the attack, and maybe there's a fog of war mechanic that led you to do that because you weren't sure exactly how many opposing factors you were coming up against. There is built in an opportunity cost. You did not leverage those factors elsewhere where maybe they could have made a difference. Oh yeah, this seems likely. I mean, I've never thought of it this way. I don't play enough ASL for this to make sense to me, but I would say this is plausible. All right, Mark Hodgkinson mentions OSCS experimental new CRT is. I'm not sure I've seen this. I know there's some folks floating around that are dissatisfied with various things about OCS and have made modifications such that they are completely changed the game. And if they bought it, that's the way they want to play, by all means. Downside of human wave attack sounds like an intentionally disadvantaging the Soviets to me. That's already built into the system. You don't really need to do that. Well, as mentioned, Allen cells are the one of the reasons this is criticized is because they used it in a bunch of different games. So Frank asks, should CRT results be consistently ordered, higher numbers generate better results, or should the results be deliberately distributed? So I think I'm not sure if you asked this before I mentioned the battle for Normandy, which does the latter of the two. I think instinctively we want to say, if high is good, then high is good, and that's that. And therefore, you have, you have DRMs that are positive, that are beneficial factors for you. On the other hand, I like having a range of different possibilities, and mathematically, there might not be a difference. You might be able to say that I'm rolling a D10. This is my recollection of the Battle for Normandy CRT. It's been a few years. So let's say you've got a D10 result, it's a D10 system, and you've got a +2. So your range is 3 to 12 rather than 1 to 10, right? Hit, which you would have if you had no DRMs. So is the number of bad results from 3 to 12 the same or different from the number of bad results from 1 to 10? Maybe it's the same number, maybe it's less, maybe it's more. I don't know. I think a design will need to be careful about that, and to do that, to study what their CRT is actually doing. But I mean, broadly, I'm not sure there's a real preference. They could be mathematically equivalent. Oh, very interesting. In France, 1944, more green troops equal more casualties. That's very interesting. Last one. I got to get the last one. I didn't pick it up at Origins. That was dumb. This is an interesting point that David Imperato brings up, and one that we will see when we get to talking about War Between the States, because War Between the States has a similar but not identical thing going on with multiple CRTs. So in War in Europe, I believe yeah, I mean, that's just basically how it works. There's 4 different CRTs in War in Europe, and it's the attacker rolling on them, and the Germans start off on the best table and gradually kind of degrade, and they start going to worse tables where the Allies at different rates start lower and end up higher. In War Between the States, there is a battle intensity level. There's also 4 CRTs, and there's a battle intensity level, and going into each battle, each commander, each player will choose a desired intensity level. And then those two numbers are added together to determine the final battle intensity level. And, on the higher intensity battles, there's more casualties and stuff like that. So it's an intriguing system. I'm not sure if it numerically works quite as well because what you end up with, and I mean, I think there's some historical basis for this, is very quickly you end up always rolling on the 4 table, the table number 4, the highest intensity table. You are limited. There's a initiative number, I think it's called initiative or leadership or something like that on the leader counters, and you are capped at that number for your intensity. So if McClellan has a 1, he can't commit to anything higher than a 1. He can do 0. Whereas if Grant has a 4, Grant could just say "fuck you" instead of 4. But you add those 2 numbers together. I feel like maybe there should be a little nuance there. We'll talk more about that when the video for War Between the States comes out. Now, on that topic, I probably not going to have the Frederick the Great video done for Wednesday. It's started, it's not done, and I'm not going to have time to edit the thing. So between now and leaving it for Compass Expo at 7 in the morning, I'm sorry, 6:30 in the morning on Wednesday morning, I doubt I'll have time to finish it. So there's that. Neil Bedke, SPI variable CRT, the combined unit morale with variable strengths, combined with the CRT that use terrain as the row cross with the odds. I'd have to have an example to actually look at, I think. So an interesting thing though that both the OCS CRT and the GOS CRT do, this is not unique to those two games either, is what actual column on the table the odds you have put you at depends on the terrain. So that in both games, there's actually four different types of terrain. You've got clear terrain, close terrain, very close terrain, and extremely close terrain. In Gauss, the terminology is slightly different, but it's the same type of thing. So if it's in the open, then it's clear terrain. If it's woods, it's generally close. That has a couple of other effects besides what exact line you are on the CRT, and then you go all the way up to like urban centers and stuff like that that have that are extremely close. And again, the Gauss CRT works very similarly in that respect, although the two CRTs are not particularly similar in other respects. Chad Kennedy says, roll three dice. One determines which of six tables you use, and the other two dice determine your combat result. I mean, you could do this. It seems a little clunky. Joe Mentum mentions the Frank Chadwick proposal, an interesting diceless combat system that replaces randomness with players simultaneously choosing combat values for finite distribution and comparing those values. Okay, so I'd have to see how this would work in practice because I don't know why you wouldn't say I roll a 12, and if assuming 12 is the maximum result. Maybe it doesn't work like that. I'd have to see it. Now, on that, we're kind of, this is a mechanical conversation here, okay? And to some extent, I talk about the mechanics is independent of whatever game we're talking about. So I'm going to draw an analogy from role playing games once again, since I'm wearing a role playing shirt today, which you may have noticed when I got up to. Did I take my allergy pills? I might not have. I'm super nasal today. So traditionally, in role-playing games, there's a variety of different resolution systems, and you roll dice, right? There are a relatively small number of games where you might work out of a card deck instead, but you're basically generating a random number. There are a smaller but not inconsiderable number of diceless RPGs at this point. Now, the first diceless RPG is the Amber Diceless, at least that I can remember, that was published. The Amber Diceless RPG from Phage Press and designer Eric Wujik. And in that system, you had kind of this auction mechanic to generate characters where you would you had a pool of points and you would bid points for these like descriptive ranks of character ability in various things. Okay. But then when it came time to resolve stuff, it was just like you might be able to narrate your way around this, but otherwise the person with the high number wins. On the other hand, there is another diceless game system that I found extremely illuminating called Nobilis by designer Jenna Moran. And that uses sort of a hidden bidding type of system where if you like commit when you there's opposing forces trying to get things done. Each side kind of bids a specific number from a resource pool that's then expended and then regenerates. And so you have to like commit a number of points to the resolution, and then whatever number is higher ends up winning. I'm smelling something sounding kind of similar with the Frank Chadwick idea, but I could be wrong. So the difference here, though, Michael Simon says he found the Library of Napoleonic Battles push-pull CRT a big turnoff. You are not alone in that. It caused him to get into La Bataille instead. Lots of blood is shed in La Bataille. I mean, certainly that's true. But remember this. I mean, the scale is quite different, right? You're talking battalions, battalions to brigades, right? And that is why I think, even if it doesn't feel good, that's one of the reasons why I think the Library of Napoleonic Battle CRT is more or less okay, because it takes into account its scale and the scale of the units, and how much damage does it take to make a brigade in combat ineffective, right? Knowing that you only have at most one reduced strength side. So Empire of the Sun, oh, this is true. But yes. So Marx points out that Empire of the Sun is generating hits just like a bucket of dice would do. But then you're rolling the dice to determine the percentage of those hits that go through and actually do damage. That's true, except without the actual bucket, right? And you don't need the bucket. If the probability distribution works out on with one die is fine. But maybe the priority is just not having the table, right? I do think that if you play a fair amount of Empire of the Sun, you're probably going to memorize that table relatively quickly. But I have not played enough Empire of the Sun to have memorized that table. Let me put it that way. I have seen this done. Adam Mesnick says use the decimal die with odds-based CRTs to avoid the temptation to go for optimal attacks. So how I'm interpreting this idea, and I've seen this done in a couple of places, is let's say you have 35 to 10 is your actual combat factor. So in most games, they're just going to tell you to just round that down to 3 to 1. Okay, you're good on 3 to 1. However, the actual number is 3.5 to 1. So let's say you roll a d10, and on a 5 or less, you roll on the higher table, the 4 to 1 column, as opposed to the 3 to 1 column. So you can do that. I'm not sure I'm explaining that especially clearly. But I think that's the basic idea that's being described here. And there's nothing wrong with that. I find that, I mean, I don't want to slow the game. I almost certainly don't want to slow the game down to that extent. There are places where Gauss uses that too. I think it's Gauss. Now somebody was saying how much they didn't like the chit pull in Enemy Action Ardennes. So I like this too. Like I said, it does tend to place more emphasis on maneuver than on bashing, which I like. I do think that has the opportunity to create a historical results. To be fair, Marty mentions, and this is absolutely true, but you see big combats constantly in Napoleonic Wars. But you can absolutely see that, and here I stand too. I think I felt like, without a numerical study of it, it's hard to say, but I do feel like we saw less of that in Virgin Queen. Let me put it that way. All right. Obviously, I gotta pick that up anyway. Let's face it. All right. So John Madison asks the Columbia. So there there is some variation among the various Columbia block games, but generally, yes, this is the mechanic that I'm talking about, where there is a factor on the block that is the number of dice you are rolling. And then you are rolling against a specific target number, a 5 or a 6, 5 or better, or 6, or whatever that number is. Ooh, yeah, good catch. Mike Berticelli mentions Fields of Despair, which is terrific, by the way. It's a bucket of dice, and it's also blocks, and it's World War I West Front, and it is very robust. I really liked it. Hopefully, that reprint will actually be along at some point. Now, I will, I guess, point out, for the sake of argument, that who is this? Those are Siberians. That there is an alternate rule set for the Napoleon's Library of Napoleonic Battles series that some people prefer because it has a bloodier CRT. That should be available either on Consim World or on BGG. Oof. Yeah. I'm not crazy about the combat system in Twilight Imperium, to be honest. And I like Twilight Imperium. It's a good game. It's very fun to play. But I think the combat system is not the highlight. Let me put it that way. John likes the D10s. John is part of the 10K Games group, and they're working on a game which I believe does use D10s. So yeah, this is essentially correct. I mean, there are some tables, but you're generally playing that with minimal tables. This is true of the a lot of the Avalanche Press stuff too. Thinking about it. And it's true of Triumph and Tragedy, but the target number varies by target type, as I recall, based on the type of unit that's shooting, as well as the type of unit that's firing. So you do have to have a table to tell you what all those numbers are. Mark mentions that MBT is also percentile. I hadn't realized that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with Axis and Allies beer and pretzels nonsense. It's not generally something I want to play, but Michael Simon asks how we're defining bucket of dice. I would define it as dice pool system, where you are rolling a variable number of dice for the resolution mechanic, and then counting successes. Generally, that's going to be defined as those dice that come up having beaten a specific target number, whether that's 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever it is. Nordic Maelstrom finally on board with P500. I've been back and forth on Banish All Their Fears, but I've got France 1940 or France 40, I should say. That's the Simonich reprint. Banish All Their Fears and Norman Conquest, and I'm on board for Norman Conquest as well. I'm looking forward to seeing that. Oof. Winterson asks if other games than Wargames use CRTs. I would say yes. Lots of so there's a huge unstated factor in that question of, is there combat in the game, right? So we are by definition then talking about games that include combat in some way. Okay, so this is all war games. Might not be actual shooting war combat, but all war games are going to have some level of combat resolution. Almost all RPGs are going to have some kind of combat resolution. So in that context, not all war games use CRTs and not all RPGs use CRTs. And generally, the idea that RPGs will require the use of a table for combat is generally out of favor. There's exceptions to this. This is generally not a favored mechanic nowadays. You're generally rolling against, I mean, again, there's exceptions, but you're generally rolling against a number to determine success, and then you're either rolling a separate roll to determine effect, meaning damage, or you are determining that effect level from the same roll, as one might do. Oh God, in well, what was that thing even called? That godlike system from Greg Stoltze, I think. The one roll engine where you'd roll it several different dice. It's the same dice every time. You'd roll several different dice, and then you'd count the results in different ways to determine different things about the result. Tabletop Sedge, Doug, welcome back. D66 is an underused mechanic. Gives you 36 possible discrete outcomes while eliminating the bell curve of the 2d6 table. The problem with this is that, and it's not an insurmountable problem. We lived with it. Is DRMs. Do you have DRMs? Maybe you just have column shifts, in which case, then who cares? But if you have DRMs, then your DRMs are de facto either numerically really goofy, or they are base 6 DRMs, where in which the arithmetic becomes maybe not comfortable for lots of people. Labatai does this. I'll be honest, it's awkward. I think overall it felt great. The whole game felt really, really good. But that D66 and base 6 DRMs on the resolution tables, not incredible. It's clumsy. I'm not gonna lie about that. Um, I suspect that Wade Moore asks if game designers calibrate their CRTs to historical results. Is that even possible? Well, we have several designers in here who might be able to answer that question better than I. I would suspect that it both happens more than you might think and happens less than you might think. Um, because how do how do you quantify you can look at historical results and casualty rates and all that other stuff and then kind of work that in, but there's a huge degree of abstraction built into, okay, I've eliminated this counter. What does that mean? I mean, I didn't annihilate it to the man in all likelihood. What I did was make it so combat ineffective that it is no longer on the board, and the whoever lost it has to rebuild it, right? So how does that, what's the loss rate that results in that combat ineffectiveness, for example? I've got these trays here, and for some reason, I'm just setting this stuff on the counter tray, and that doesn't make any sense. Ah, very interesting. So John's system, they've got a website up now, 10k-games.com, I believe. John, is that you were not going to be able to put it in the chat? Is it 10k-games.com? I think it is. They got some things in the cooker, and their CRT is 2d10, not percentile. Some wargame designers annoyingly call, and I think Goss does this, percentile 2d10. It's not 2d10. 2d10 is you roll 2d10 and you add a number together. Percentile is you roll 2d10 and one die is the tens die and one die is the ones die. All right. Oh, nice. This sounds awesome. I assume you painted it too. I did buy into, speaking of 3D printing, minor digression. I did back the Traveler Small Craft 3D printable Kickstarter. So at some point we're going to be trying to do that. The recommendation is that you downsize your nozzles, and I might do that. It's going to be time for me to change the nozzle pretty soon anyway. So Perfidious Albion says that combat commander, each nationality, the deck composition is slightly different as well as the hand. This is totally true, right? Part of the tuning of each nationality is the decks available. All right. This is the beauty of Clash of Spears, actually. This is the table that's used in Great Battles of History that shows you how different weapon systems and doctrinal systems interact on the battlefield. And to my mind, it's one of the highlights of GBOH. And one of the key skills to learn is how it works and what's good against what. I will clarify for John if he hasn't answered already. He means 2d10 as in 2 to 20. 0 to 18 would be 2d10 minus 2. Yeah, I don't have all of the C3I stuff, which is very substantial, but I do have all the boxes, and I do have many, if not most, of the individual expansions. I don't have everything, but I do have it. I will totally back the D66 idea. I think it is an underused mechanic. If I was going to use D66, I would rely on some other way than DRMs to do DRMs. Ooh, very nice. So Mike Berticelli mentions that last 100 yards Russian front will be arriving tomorrow. The last 100 yards folks will be excited about that. Okay, so let me talk about Rollmaster here, because Rollmaster is one of those RPGs where I would say that you do have a CRT, or more specifically, you have about 50 different CRTs, depending on exactly what thing you are trying to inflict damage with. So in Rollmaster, it's the now we're talking about Rollmaster second edition more than Rollmaster standard system. What I'm about to say is broadly true of standard system 2. That's a later edition of Rollmaster, but there's quite a bit more added complexity in standard system. So the basic system is you have a skill rating, which is calculated from a variety of different things, and you do that outside the game, right? You do all the math and say, okay, I have a long broadsword skill, and it is a plus 90 or whatever the number is. Okay, so it's a percentile base, and you know when you start the combat that you're plus 90 broadsword. So you roll percentile dice, you add that number, you add the number you rolled to the skill. Right, this is true of anything, not just combat. And then you subtract a defensive rating and any situational modifiers that might apply. Okay. And then you you look up the resulting number on a table. And each different attack type has a different table. So if you have a broadsword, you roll on the broadsword table. If you have a spear, you roll on the spear table. If you are shooting a lightning bolt, you roll on the lightning bolt table. Natural weapons like claws and things like that have their own tables. So, this is why it was called Chart Master. The system itself, character creation could take some time, but the system itself in second edition was not that complicated. It's just that there was a lot of tables, and it required kind of nearly optimal or near optimal organization on the part of everybody involved, not just the game master, because the player needs to have their table, right? The tables they're using for their character, they need to have those ready to go. So we probably kept the Kinkos or two in business when we were playing Rollmaster back in the day. So that would be an example of an RPG CRT. But if you recall that first edition AD&D had a different 2 hit tables for the individual classes. They got rid of that with second edition, and that has never made a reappearance. I liked the tables at the time more than I liked THACO, which is the second edition where it just turns it into arithmetic. In retrospect, I think THACO is the better mechanic. You do get used to THACO rather than having to look it up on a table. But those would be examples of CRTs that are not necessarily out of war games. All right, so I mean, this by itself could be an episode, right? Is Are role playing games war games? And frankly, I think the answer is sometimes, yeah. I think they are. Some of them are. Some of them are pretty clearly not. So, it is going to be complicated. It is very difficult to call Fiasco a war game, for example. It is much less difficult to call D&D a war game. Also with the caveat that different people run D&D different ways, and some people might run it in a very wargamey way, and some people might run it very differently. Conflict games, war games, historical war games. The last what I call war games. Sure. I mean, I'm certainly not going to quibble with this, but these are labels that we can apply, and different people are going to apply differently, right? Some people like that. Some fucking hates this. Okay, hates this. Dislikes the entire game based on the fact of the sort of scattered results of the CRT. Battle for Normandy Second Edition. Don't ask me, but hopefully, I definitely want to see it. I definitely want to see the Battle for Sicily too. I like the Battle for Normandy, and it's one of those things like this where I got rid of the old edition based on the assumption that there was a new edition coming. And with this, I ended up sitting around for several years without it. All right. So Bob Kowalczyk mentions the unit proficiency column shifts in the Third World War. And this is true. This wasn't a straight differential shift. If you had I think if you had 1 or 2 differential, you got 1 column shift. If you got a 3 or 4 differential, you had 2 column shifts, something like that. I might be getting the exact numbers wrong, even though it's only been about 6 months since I've played it. But it's not 1 for 1. Like if I'm attacking a proficiency 6 unit with my proficiency 9 unit, the column shift, it's not necessarily 3 column shifts. This is kind of true. But you could just highlight the columns you want to use and just use the regular one. All right. Winterson, thanks for stopping by. You probably left 20 minutes ago. And in fact, I am like 30 minutes behind. All right. We're going to try and buzz here. So Michael Simon, I think we're talking about Battle for Normandy here, except for single scenario he's been working on. Dan Holt's got a pretty good excuse for not getting as much done on the war game as he wanted to. Let me put it that way. Yes. So as has been mentioned, Combat Commander. John, I would encourage you to give Combat Commander a try. Lots of people like it. I dislike it fairly strongly personally, but doesn't mean I'm right and they're all wrong. That's just personal preference. This that's so Kyle Harris says the CRT and GCACW is the driving factor of offensive strategy. You're trying to maneuver into that +2 DRM because of the CRT. I mean, to some extent, yes. The +2 is a rule of thumb, right? Sometimes you're just gonna have to make the attack and not have the +2. But sure, you're trying to get positive odds attacks, right? But this is true of every game, isn't it? I mean, um, you're trying to maneuver in such a way that your attacks are favorable. Why fight the guy on his terms? Um, I have a half dozen reasons for disliking the Europa CRT. The fact that it's just a D6 CRT is, I think, fundamentally not the issue. The fundamental issue is I think the lack of steps in the game, right? So, all right. So let me give a show. Oh, shit, hold on. We got to thank some folks here. So John Madison, thank you so much. Um, the support is much appreciated. What's my take on having more than one CRT versus say a complex CRT to address different aspects of combat in a game? Um, I mean, is there a difference, right? I mean, there can be, but there doesn't necessarily have to be a difference between having one single CRT and multiple that's got a bunch of layers in it and a bunch of different CRTs that you would roll on in different situations. To take the war in Europe example, right, where there's 4 different CRTs, could we have put that all in one table? Yeah, I think you could. I'd have to think about how you would do that. But you could totally do that. I think that would be completely viable. Um, do you have different kinds of combat, right? So in OCS, for example, there is a CRT, but there's also a barrage table. That barrage table is itself a CRT. It can do combat losses or inflict other effects, and using it will result in the expenditure of your supply. It is it is a combat results table in a broad sense. So right there, you've got 2 different combat tables. So I think that, and there's millions of other examples of that. So I don't think that's a problem. In general, I think designers ought to, and I generally do probably ought to shoot for minimization of complexity. So, think carefully about it. But if you decide you need 2 CRTs or 3 CRTs or whatever, do it. There's games that have like a mobile attack CRT and a prepared attack CRT, for example. Also, Jeff Beeler, thanks very much. This is a great idea. I will be seeing Danny at Compass Expo in a few days. So don't be shocked if we do, in fact, bully him into showing up on the show at some point. We don't have a guest planned for Compass Expo. So I intend to, whoever I can bully into doing it on the spot is going to be the guest for the Thursday night show. This is also making the assumption that we have good enough bandwidth to do it. This, I think, so Matt Davidson points out, and I've seen this in a couple of places, has results weighted toward the middle rather than to the high or the low end. I think this is a little harder to justify, frankly, but numerically this can work because if you're rolling on a bell curve, you are more likely to roll those middle numbers than you are the extremes. All right. This is totally true too. The more you play a system, the more you see the loopholes, exploits, and shortcomings not readily apparent in the design when you first play it. This is totally true. And sometimes you make a decision that you're not going to care too much and keep playing it. And sometimes you'll just become increasingly unsatisfied. I know people who have had this exact reaction to OCS, and I'm happy to say I have not had that reaction to OCS. I did have that reaction to Goss a little bit, but we'll get back to that at some point, I'm sure. Doug, did you know that there's a new updated edition of Vakdam Rhine coming out that might be out as soon as mid next year? I didn't know that. I wasn't told that it was secret, so I assume it's not secret. All right. So Austin Riediger, welcome to the show. Likes the contested die rolls in GCACW. Really likes the long street attack system where the defender shoots with defensive fire, then the attacker assaults if they aren't driven off. So that idea, I like that too, but that's just the way it works. So you've got an attacker coming in for an assault, and the defender is going to get to shoot at them. That same idea happens in Line of Battle and in Great Battles of the American Civil War as well. Two game systems at more or less the same scale, but which are more complicated and slower to play than any of the Blind Swords games. Let me put it that way. Yes, 1776 did, and there was an option to do this in War and Peace as well, and there were chits. I don't remember if those chits came in the game or if they were in the general, but you could do that in 1776, and then you would pick a tactic, and the defender would pick a tactic, and then you'd look up on this little matrix to see how the results would be modified based on the interaction of those two tactics. It actually worked fine. And as Rob Johnson points out, Battles of the American Revolution, which is a tactical game, does something similar. So Joe Mentum clarifies this Frank shadowing system. So you have chits, and you pick a chit, the higher the better, and then discard the drawn chit from the pool. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. So it is a resource management type of deal. And Matt Davidson points out that Caesar's Legion has tactics cards, which is true. Opposed. Oh, good call. Actually, Doug mentions odds-based CRTs that use where both the attacker and the defender roll. So there's two separate things happening here. One is the odds-based CRT, which we've all seen a million examples of. Let's face it. So we don't need to really discuss this ad nauseum. But we see less in war games of the opposed roll, where both attacker and defender roll and then apply independent results. And Goss does this. In Goss, both the attacker and the defender roll. The attacker wants to roll high. The defender wants to roll low, which makes the DRMs consistent. Am I getting that right? Yeah, I am getting that right. The positive DRMs are good for the attacker. The negative DRMs are good for the defender. And the defender wants their roll to be low, and optimally the attacker's roll to be low as well. And the attacker wants their roll to be high and the defender's roll to be high. It's rather elegant the way it works, to be honest about it. Oof. I am not qualified to comment on this. We will get Empires in Arms played at some point, Eric Schaefer. But I haven't yet today. All right. Yeah, the decimal die. I'm not, like I said, I'm not crazy about that. Thank you for I did get a haircut for Compass Expo and didn't comb it today, but it's short enough that that's kind of optional. I mean, if the game allows you to count factors, count factors. I mean, you do what the game wants you to do. If you're allowed to count factors, I'm going to assume the designer wants me to count factors. If they don't want me to count factors, then the designer should design a mechanic where I don't need to count factors. However that works, there's a number of different approaches to prevent factor fiddling. One of which is the OCS Fog of War rule: don't inspect anybody else's stacks, which is quite straightforward and somewhat effective in that regard. And another is the Simonich approach, where the odds just kind of top out after a while. All right, good idea. This is a good idea. Eric Goebel mentions to have extra copies of the CRT floating around. That's obviously good advice. There's like a ton of Turks here. So there's clearly a huge alternate history space where the Turks can do stuff here. I have not. Ooh, man, dude, that game has like a ton of different mechanics for different things, and I'd be reluctant to make the comparison directly. But I mean, there's a lot going on in Avalon Hills, dude. All right, hockey games may in fact have CRTs, and in fact, they probably ought to. Is it? It didn't used to be, but I mean, I guess I'm talking more about 40K than the Warhammer Fantasy. But I mean, there's been a million editions of that. So, what edition you're talking about? I never played. That's totally possible. So, I think Mark is asking the question, answering the question here of does the designer tune the CRT to represent historical outcomes? Um, I maybe I didn't put this quite clearly enough. I think a good designer is going to do that. I think a lazy designer might not. Mark is going to do that. So, and I'm not calling anybody out on that, but a less careful design, less conscientious designer might not. Oh my God, Marty. I mean, God bless you for doing this Lord's work here, but oh no, thank you. Um, all right, so 10k-games.com is the new 10k games site. They just put it up like a couple of days ago. And yes, I'm working on it. I'm about 25 minutes behind now. The home of the critical hit table. Not the first critical hit tables to pop up. I think Ardwulf Grimoire had the first critical hit tables, but Rollmaster did critical hit tables better. Excel leader. I'd probably enjoy this. Neil Baggy still likes our Rollmaster. I have a fondness for Rollmaster. I'm not getting rid of our Rollmaster stuff, but I'm also realistic about probably never playing it again. There is a sort of semi clone of it floating around now called Against the Dark Master, which is a very streamlined Rollmaster esque RPG. That if you like the ideas in Rollmaster and just wish it was easier to do, I recommend looking at Against the Dark Master. I have a flip through video of it. This is potentially absolutely true. And makes me ask the question of if we have both DRMs and column shifts, why are they doing something fundamentally different? Is the how does the scaling factor in? I mean, there could be reasons why you'd have both, but you know what are those reasons? I mean, it's not an undeserved name, but most people take that to mean that it's oh my god, it's obscenely complicated, and it's really not. Most unusual war game CRT I've encountered. Somebody might have been Doug from the Tabletop's Edge mentioned the 1914 Mike Resch games. Those are very interesting CRTs. Very interesting CRTs. I may have something else to say about this at some point as well. Stigler says that 1914 Knock Paris has some loopy CRTs, easy to understand, off center. I don't know. I can't speak to that. Nor can I speak to Angola, even though probably should check that out at some point. So this is an interesting one because there are no factors on the counters, which also leads me to now I am not making a value statement on the underlying mechanic of the OSS system, which is this is a part of. Okay. Um, Normally no factors on the counters is a thing that I'll be like, I don't know. I don't know. However, I have seen it work. I haven't played OSS, but it totally works in unconditional surrender. And I thought was a highlight of that system. There are no factors on the counters. There is a CRT that you roll against. And as I recall, it is an opposed roll. And you have a different set of national DRM. So Germans are better, Soviets, presumably early war Soviets, are worse. Michael Simon, thanks for stopping by. Oh, here we go. I might have seen this peeking ahead here. Ugh. Oh, yeah, and this is actually the game I was thinking of. France 1944 has like a I'll use Mark's terminology, a mobile CRT and a set piece battle CRT. I mean, that's not that weird. I mean, even you could view the World in Flames assault versus blitzkrieg tables as separate tables or just different columns on the same table. I think maybe they're different tables. That's kind of a semantic argument. I mean, I think this is important even in World War II, depending on scale, right? If you're talking about a strategic game, maybe you don't care. But if you are talking about a tactical game, well, tactical probably it doesn't distinguish because it's tactical, but operational might distinguish mobile. World War II operational might distinguish between mobile and static combats. I have one of Danny Parker's books on the Bulge too. He's written more than one, I think. I think he wrote one and edited one. I might be wrong about that. Compass Expo, Mark, is in Meriden, Connecticut. It's just outside south, as I recall, of Hartford. It's pretty drivable from New York City. In fact, we'll be driving through more or less the outskirts. Understand that New York City has a lot of outskirts, okay? But we'll be driving through the general vicinity of New York City. I know that Danny will be there, and Frank Davis will be there, and John Kranz will be there, and some other people will probably be there. And I'm sure I'm forgetting people who are probably offended. It's not a Monday if we haven't offended somebody. BCS has 3 separate CRTs. All right, so I got to think about this. This is kind of true. You have the regular combat CRT, and then you have the engagements table, and those are 2 different types of combats. And then you do have the barrage table, which you should consider. Again, we're broadly interpreting CRT to not just necessarily mean a thing that says CRT on the card, but any table used to resolve combat in which you roll the dice or whatever you do and look the result up on a table, I think is a CRT in a broad sense. And in that sense, then the tabletop's edge is correct. There are 3 different CRTs in BCS as well. And I agree with well, okay, so a couple things. Stigler's saying a couple different things here. You have as many CRTs as you need to make your system work. So I think as a general design aesthetic, you'd like your system to be not any more complicated than it needs to be to do what you would like it to do. You want it to be as simple as you can make it, but you still want it to do what you want it to do. And sometimes you won't be able to make it as simple as it could be because it has to do what you would like it to do. So I agree with Stigler's statement here. And I also agree with his second, totally unrelated statement. Somebody is always not going to like whatever you did. That is obviously true as well. I did say Meriden, Connecticut. Did I say Darien, Connecticut? Well, maybe it came out that way. Maybe we're having some microphone issues. Stranger things have happened. Mark Hodgkinson, thanks so much. 25. Well, I don't know. I wasn't counting them. There's a lot of different ways to model combat, right? I came into this not prepared to talk about the way combat's modeled in Combat Commander, for example. By the way, the t-shirt came from the official Chaosium merch store for anybody who is curious. And I'm pretty happy with it. Good quality shirt, too, actually. Yes. So I agree with this. Is one of the cool things about BCS is armor actually works like armor and not like just tougher, faster infantry. All right. Well, John, we'll all get to take a look at this thing. You'll be able to show it to both of us, and we'll be able to yell at you about how terrible it is in February. So Marty should go to Compass Expo because he's up there, as I recall. I mean, if you got multiple CRTs, just to have multiple CRTs, then what's the point? But if it does something, then yeah, have multiple CRTs. Yeah, there will be a winner's victory game happening there. I will get photographs. And I will show the photographs probably on the next show. R War and P said shits. So yeah, but I don't know if that came in the magazine or in the game. I forget. I thought it was an option. So yeah, this is another really interesting thing about not even just these 3 things. So unconditional surrender, in addition to the things I just described, also uses the same CRT for land combat, air combat, naval combat, and strategic warfare. So it's really, and you just basically have different sets of modifiers for those 4 different modes of conflict. It's really interesting, and actually, there's a ton I like about unconditional surrender. There's some things I don't, but um, this is true too. So this is also true of the U.S. Civil War. That I would now see. That's a great point, though. Is this multiple parallel CRTs, or is it just one CRT with 3 different sets of columns? Just based on the way it's laid out on the player aid cards, my instinct is to say it's one CRT with different sets of columns. But there's no fun. I mean, that's arbitrary. You could call it either one. All right. So Eric Goebel, thanks for stopping by, and yeah, everybody don't forget to thumbs up the video and all that jazz. Um, Subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. So Marty touched base on this. The final draft of the rulebook has been signed off on. It's going to the printer anytime. And will probably start shipping in the next month or so. Let's hope. Printer is local. So, and I think all the other components are done. So Marty has given an update here. So I mean, I want to see it too. Don't get me wrong. But I'm also not dying. I want to see what Mark Hinkle and team can do with that system. Now, see, I paid for it too, but I paid for it like I don't know, beginning of the year or something like that. All right, kids. All right, kids, be nice. Kilroy from Kilroy was here is here. So Sound of Drums might, but who cares? I can have more than one ILAO game. Great War in Europe. Yeah, good. It's been decades since I played that. I played that in the original. This is the Ted Racer Great War in Europe Command Magazine game. Later standalone sister game, Great War in the Near East, both combined later by GMT in the Great War in Europe. I think Deluxe Edition was what they called it, and that the GMT version is the one to have. I played it in the original Command Magazine version, and we liked it. It had some issues, which more or less got fixed in the other one. I am really looking forward. Mo from Mo's Game Table is here. I'm really looking forward to seeing what Danny brings to us with The Last Gamble. Oh, there you go. I'm guessing that something can be arranged. It will be great to see you there if you do come. So yeah, no kidding. Well, so I don't know. I don't know if Mark wants to answer this question or not. I don't know if I'm interested in that whenever it comes. I mean, we do need to remember. I'm just going to point out. Everybody, be nice. I'm going to point out that virtually nobody in this hobby is making a living solely in this hobby. Okay, it's a side gig for virtually everybody. Stuff gets delayed. I'm not going to get bent about stuff getting. If I think I paid for something and I'm actually getting fucked on it, that's a different question. But I don't think that's happening here. I think it's several months late. There's other stuff that's several more months late from other publishers, right? I'm not going to get worried about that. Did I say Darien? I thought I said Meriden, and I feel like I go out of my way to say Meriden because for the first 2 years I was calling it Meridian. Very good. So there's a really interesting combat model, in fact, in Der Weltkrieg. I mean, it suits the topic of World War One. So they're like the attacker makes an attack on the CRT, and it's basically a manpower number that determines the column, and then they look at the result. But then the defender gets to counterattack, and whether they counterattack, what strength they counterattack at depends on how they take their own result. If they choose to retreat, I think they will counterattack at twice strength. If they choose to not retreat and try to hold, they will attack at where they take all the losses. They will attack at 3 times their own strength. It's a very interesting, not just CRT, but combat model in general. Of course, CRT is part of the combat model. So, Egric Tall, I will be. Lots of folks are going to be at Compass Expo. That's great. So there might be a copy of this coming, courtesy Herman. We'll see if when that shows up. I don't feel I got so much to do that I don't want to badger people about it. So if it happens, whenever it happens, it happens. I think I don't know. We'll ask Danny this, but I think the idea is more that he just wants to have a last word on what has been his design focus, right? Which is the Battle of the Bulge. He just doesn't know that he'll have anything more to say about it. I think Mark said something similar about Pacific War. He doesn't think he's going to have anything more to say after this on that topic. I'm not sure it's more complicated than that. So, but I certainly hope he's not unwell. We'll find out. He's supposed to be at Compass Expo this weekend. So, and yeah, this is another thing is the quality standard that NES has set is really very high, and if we have to wait an extra 4 months for it, who cares? I don't care. It's not that late. All right, yeah, John, this is Winter's Victory from New England Simulations. Design Mark Henkel. It's based on the old Frank Davis design for Wellington's Victory, but it's the Battle of Eylau, so it's same scale. It looks beautiful from what I have seen of the components, and so we'll see. Oh yeah, so best are. I'm really becoming very tired of people getting cancer. Let me put it that way. So he has obviously our best wishes for his speedy recovery as well. Let me put it that way. So this is not a John. This is no longer a delay situation. Anybody that put money into this boondoggle is just fucked. Okay, I am sorry, but that's just the reality of the situation. Well, VUCA's doing. I'm hesitant to draw this direct comparison actually between VUCA simulations in Germany and New England simulations in New England. VUCA's doing mostly mounted maps. I really like what VUCA's doing. I really like what NES is doing, but they're not the same. Not everything VUCA's done has been mounted. Knock Paris is not mounted. It's like 3 maps. That's why. So yeah, I think Judd Vance is the developer for this as well, and he's Judd's recovering. He seems to be recovering well, so that's great. And we would like him to recover fully and quickly. So, all right, Joe Menton will be at Compass Expo as well. So lots of people. Yeah, Hannibal definitely uses battle cards. So you wrote it out once, but I don't know that I read it right. So yeah, so we are actually stunningly caught up to the chat right now. So that is remarkable. So we got a little bit of time left here, but let me just say thank you for coming out, everybody. Thanks for coming out. And okay. Do we have actual numbers here? Yeah, let's see. We tapped that at about 140 tonight, which ain't bad. Shockingly, the website was up for renewal a year or two ago, and they actually renewed it. I have told the story. It's not really my story to tell, but the person whose story it is to tell is here tonight, and he can feel free to talk about that or talk about that on a future show. Those folks, some folks were in town and actually called them on the phone, and shockingly, they answered the phone. And I don't know what kind of high pressure sales technique was used, but they ended up like going over their house and checking out. They're still working on stuff. They're convinced that they're still a viable operation. They're the only people convinced that they're still a viable operation, but it's technically they're not totally dead. I sent him an email probably 3 years ago now, inquiring about something in a polite way. I never spent any money on Total War, so don't worry about that. I may have asked if I could buy the maps or a counter set or something like that, and they never got back to me. So yeah, this is John. It's a great story, actually. We'll eventually have John and his design and development partners on, and I will probably bring this up because it is a great story. All right, so I'm working on the designer is not here tonight. The designer has been here and in fact was here last week. Thomas Prowl is sole credit on the design of the new edition, but Dice of Decision is a co-design credit with Alan Emmerich, and Schiffskrieg is a co-design credit with someone whose name I will feel bad for forgetting. So I think that's the reason for the delay. And if that extra time, and it's been a few years, it's a couple of years late. So I think about 2 years ago is when it turned into it's going to be a whole new edition of the game. And that may not have been more complicated than, hey, they're out of print now. We got to reprint it anyway. Let's just do a whole new edition. If they turn that extra time into additional playtesting and polish, which it kind of looks like they have done, cool. I'm cool with that. Oh boy, I'd have to take a look at these. It's been a long time. I love these games, but it's been a long time, and I've seen hundreds of CRTs since I last touched Rise of the Roman Republic. So, Perfidious Albion, no, there is no hope. There is no hope. It is hopeless. Oh God, you guys got to put this on the internet. So you're gonna redirect that domain name to the downfall video on YouTube. That's what you'd have to do. So I got theories about the specifics. Some of the specifics about the reason that Axis Empires took longer than it was expected. That I'll go over and above that, but I'm going to try and get the designer on. So and we'll talk to him about it rather than me speculating and pulling rumors out of my ass. So I would just as soon not do that. So yeah, that the HMS GRD story is a great story. That hey, I'm glad they're doing good. So John is in fact secret investor number 4. So at some point when ArtyCon, I'll warn everybody in advance that this is going to happen. At some point there will be an ArtyCon, and at some point, probably I'll have people pay something, whatever, and this will depend on what the space costs. I will have people pay something to like get in, and they'll get a T-shirt, an ArtyCon T-shirt, along with their entrance fee. And those who pay extra will have an ArtyCon T-shirt that says "Secret Investor" and a number on the back. So the secret investors. I might do that as a. I actually thought about doing pre-registration through Kickstarter. I could make that work. I mean, we're not talking about 500 people here, right? We're talking about 30. So I think I could make that work. I don't know that Kickstarter is really built for that, but unless somebody wants to argue with me, I might just do that. So let's start wrapping up with video schedule. We will have an unboxing video on Thursday. Like I said earlier, we are not going to get the Wargames on Earth Frederick the Great video out this week, unfortunately. John, I do, but I'm not digging it up right now, and I have given it literally to you before. Check your Discord history. That's where it will be. It's hard to find because there's a million of those downfall parody ranting videos. So yeah, this is probably true. So we may try it. It might be something I gotta like nail down a space first, right? It'll be here up in Northeast Ohio. We'll see who can make it. And then the unofficial ArtyCon that's in my basement, that's just going to be just show up thing, and I'll provide crash space and breakfast. So I should talk to Frank about, I might actually corner Frank about this for like a 2-minute clip if I can, keep Frank to 2 minutes. Um, that I could slip into that video. That would actually be super interesting. So yes, I've totally I have I will make time to talk to Frank this weekend. Let me put it that way. So total the print bureau. Oh, I mean, just the stories out of this. If you wrote the story of this as a comedy, I'm not sure it would be different. Okay. Oh yeah, there's plenty of reasons to set foot in Ohio. Plenty of reasons to set foot in Ohio. Plenty of reasons. Many reasons. Almost as many reasons as there are secret investors that way. So Stegler, I'm going to mention to you that there is talk serious enough that I consider it about at least 80% firm of a major interest level in GBACW at Buckeye Game Fest in April, late April, early May. So yeah, me and Mo, we have worked out no details other than saying yes, we'd like to do this. I am sure we will both be streaming, uh, possibly separately and together, from Compass Expo. So this will totally happen. Oh God, yes, no kidding. There's actually a game that somebody was working on. Apparently, it doesn't have a publisher yet. I'm pretty sure it's just going to land somewhere. Called The Death of Lenin. That somebody has designed, and it looks neat. And it was on a table, and I saw some pictures of it from this SD Histocon. It would be that I would buy that. I'm interested in the topic. So wasn't there a big auction of stuff for them to try and get more fun? There was a fire and a flood, and then someone was electrocuted. And it's like the drummer from Spinal Tap. It keeps getting electrocuted. You know. So I don't. Oh, there's been the law has been laid down that no alcoholic beverages are allowed in the convention area. So we will see. We will see what that turns into. That might mean we're out in the hall. So somebody should do this. Ed McMahon should show up at the door with a giant envelope that says Publishers Clearinghouse. So this has totally been true. It was like, yeah, you want to? Hey, we should do a show tonight together. Yeah, that's a cool idea. Let's do that. 10 minutes? Yeah, cool. That was basically. And I thought it was great content. I mean, there was the iced tea was a flowing. So Hakapala is a little. I'm not a fan of Hakapala as a product. So yes, there was a thing about there. Bill has kind of made it a point to say, and there's no alcoholic beverages in the convention area. I don't care what you do outside. You do whatever you want outside. So I'm not actually out to get Bill in trouble. So we'll figure it out. But I'm guessing that figuring it out does not mean that there will be no iced tea. We'll figure it out. Okay. So yeah, I mean, you're gonna say, I bet, Jesus Christ. I can imagine there's exceptions to this. I'd like to think I am one of the exceptions to this. But lots of like really serious hobbyists live like fucking pigs, and I can imagine that. And this is I noticed this in the SCA too. Not everybody, obviously, but it seems to be common that people kind of have a hoarder thing going on. And the I'd like to not be that guy, and my wife would definitely like me to not be that guy. And I can just imagine that is the kind of establishment that those guys are in. So that all the HMS GRD guys living together as platonic life partners are not exactly keeping house in an orderly way, right? So no, this was like last year. That's the thing. This wasn't in like 1994. If that was the case, then it would be different. This was like last year. Yeah. That's why it's a cool story, actually. So, all right. So, folks, here's the plan. Unboxing video on Thursday. We should go. That's already up. It's already scheduled. Don't worry about it. Just watch the video. What do we got? It's the latest issue of World at War magazine. That's what we got this week. So the game is Baltic Offensive. It looks pretty good. Javier Romero design, by the way. So we will assuredly do the show with Dan on Thursday. We'll see if that works. Mo and I'll probably do something on Friday. I'll probably have a series of shorts complaining about various things, including getting COVID and how cold it is in the room, or how hot it is in the room, and a variety of other things that I am apt to complain about. I will be bringing Fatal Alliances, which means I need to bring 2 sheets of plexi and various other supplies. And I'm hoping we'll get that. Hopefully, we'll get a day of that in. And then we're gonna play on Thursday. I'm supposed to play Europa Universalis: The Price of Power. And then this hasn't stopped me before. And then we will do whatever else happens on Saturday. And then we're leaving early-ish on Sunday. I don't know what time that sounds like. We're talking about noon, but there's no rush to get out of there necessarily, but there's no particular reason to stay after 9 or 10 a.m. either. I don't think so. We'll see. If there's a morning game, there's a morning game, and that's cool. I'll probably bring Death Valley as well, because there was talk of playing that, but we'll see what actually happens. I don't know if the EU game is a Thursday game. So Here I Stand is a great convention game. Actually, it's easy to get shorts. I mean video shorts, not shorts. I hardly ever wear shorts. I'm not like one of those weird people that I can't wear shorts, or one of those people, I gotta wear shorts, I can't wear long pants. I always usually just wear long pants. I'm just most comfortable in long pants, and really, who wants to look at my white ass hairless legs anyway? It's weird. All right, folks. So we are out of time tonight. We started slightly late. I should have a variety of different lengths available in the intro video. I'll worry about that at a later time. So hopefully this has been a good show. I do appreciate everybody coming out. And if you have not yet thumbed up the video, thumbed up the video, or subscribe to the channel, go ahead and do so. Big shout out to the patrons of Ardwulf's Lair. Their support and encouragement keeps this gravy train happening. Except there ain't much gravy, but it's much appreciated. It really does make the channel continue to exist. So it is much appreciated. So thank you, patrons. And big shout out to the patrons who are going to get a big shout out right now. Everybody have a great week. We'll see you in a couple of days.